we chat about this sometimes, like within the band, even not just me being in Streetsville, but Tim grew up in Richmond Hill, and like Max grew up in Toronto, but then even just moving to Hamilton, like there's all these pockets in Southern Ontario of like killer music scenes. And like I'm so fortunate to grow up in a city like Mississauga. Strangely enough, when you think about it, what do you think? You think Square One, and like the center of it is like a mall, and you don't think that there's these little hubs. But Streetsville was like, I in high school I was going there like every weekend. There was a place called the Masonic Lodge, and there'd be 100 people crammed into this small basement venue with terrible sound, and and everyone would just be belligerent, and I saw some crazy bands there, like I was talking to my friend the other day about this. I was in grade 10 or 11, and I saw Alexis on Fire perform there. Like, and there was 15 people there, and I think they were opening up for Death from Above, and you process that now, and these are like high ticket.
That's a good double bill right there.
Yeah, and you're seeing them in front of like 15 people, and I remember the drummer from Death from Above did this Eric Singer drum solo. I think he's a drummer from Kiss, and there's one of their records, there's this like drum solo, and he did the drum solo, and I remember being like, this guy's crazy. And then like 10 years later, they're like the biggest band in the world, like, so it's it's such, I don't know what it's, I haven't been there in many years, and I know Masonic kind of stopped doing shows, like even I think I was in grade 12 when they stopped doing shows, but like just being able to be around that and growing up with it. And I met so many people, like, people that I ended up playing with later, like Bill Scarlett, for example. Like I used to go watch them play, and then like years and years later, when they kind of were doing their second record, it was like, hey, do you want to come on board? But I wouldn't have met them if I didn't go to the Masonic Lodge shows, and like I think I saw Billy Talent at the hockey arena there, like the small hockey arena, and Il Scarlett opened for them that year. And yeah, it's a crazy, and Neil knows, like that's a good question from him, but he was very much involved in it, and I played with his band with Bernadette. I don't know if you ever saw us play. We used what was the name of the bar? There's a bar down on the corner. Do you know what I'm talking about? In the, not Cook Collins, but the other one further down.
The Cock and Pheasant, or
it was the Cock and Pheasant. No, yeah, it was kind of like in that like kind of like strip mall at the very end of Streetsville, like like where.
Yeah,
kind of,
so I did open mics at the Cock and Pheasant, but maybe there was a pub that predated that. I'm not sure.
No, I think that's the one. I just always mix the names up around there, but yeah, like played there a bunch, and with Neil, and yeah, it was an amazing and amazing city to be a part of growing up. Yeah.
That's awesome. I reached out to one of the most successful Canadian bands of all time to help me start this podcast. So here are some words from Gilmore from Triumph. So you ready for this? So he says, in 2022, there's no doubt that the Arkells are Canada's premier rock band, and for good reason. Powered by Tim's rock-solid drumming, the rhythm section is a thunderous backbone that sets the stage for Max to work his magic on the crowd like only he can do, turning Arkells fans into an extension of the group, a family, really. Nobody does it better, in my opinion. Gilmore from Triumph.
That's amazing. That's cool. I know him and Tim are pretty tight, so that's really cool of him to say that. And yeah,
there's some history there with Metalworks tying everything together.
Yeah, Tim went to school there, and then kind of just really became involved with them. We've done some recording there too. It's a great spot, Another Mississauga institution too, Who would think, right? Like one of the craziest studios, like where like Christina Aguilera, like everyone like recorded
40-year history, right?
Had a room there or something, Yeah, in Mississauga of all places, like, so yeah, it's great.
So you're a huge music fan. I'm curious, where does this love of music come from? Like if we go way back to the beginning, where does this love of music come from? Are there any like earliest musical memories that jump out at you?
Yeah, a little. Yeah, I mean, mostly, like my parents really, really pushed me kind of into it. My dad was a drummer, and he played in bands, and has stories, where he was playing at, speaking of playing at the Drake on yesterday night. Like my dad used to play there when it was like when you wouldn't go there. Like it was really not a good place to be, and he was playing cover
He's
gigs
the
there.
original gangster, your dad. I like it.
Crazy, right? And so so a lot of it came from him, and came from, he always had gear around the house. Like when I grew up, there was a studio in the basement, and he had all this crazy gear. Like I was talking to my wife about earlier, because he had like, original mini Moog, and like the like the thing's worth probably $15,000 now, but in the 80s he sold it for $500 or something. You know what I mean? Like just all this crazy. So I was always around it, and then as I got older, he kind of took me to shows. Like the first band I ever saw was Kiss. Like I used to go to all the Beatles conventions in Toronto when they were having them at the Metro Convention Center. So I saw like, Beatle cover bands and whatnot, and so, yeah, like again, a lot of it came from them, and I think they probably noticed that I was gravitating towards it, and then were like, hey, like, do you want to actually, like, I remember, I think I was 6, and they were like, do you want to take piano lessons? And I was like, yeah, okay, and then they bought a piano. Like my dad sold all his shit and bought me a piano. Like a piano that I don't have anymore, and that I'm like, oh shit, I actually could have used all that old vintage synth gear too. So but
I was curious with him as a drummer, how you ended up
yeah.
more as a keyboard player.
Yeah, well, he got into recording. So I mean, drums are his bag, and he still plays. He plays in cover bands here and there, and but I think he got into recording for a little bit. Him and his friends were going to open up like a recording studio, and they bought all this gear, and then I don't exactly know the story or how it fell apart or why, but they had all this gear, and I think he retained some of it or whatever. And so there was like, he had like an original Juno, I think a Juno 6, or it was either 60 or 6, and he had like a mini Moog, and like, a drum, like the like an 808, I think, like that, and like reels to reel. So yeah, I was just around it. He had guitars and stuff. He's kind of like an all around, like drums are his thing, but he plays guitar, he plays piano, like kind of an all around kind of guy. So yeah, just kind of like always around it with him. And we used to jam too, like those are some of the earliest memories. Like I learned to chord because we would jam Beatles music. Like he would play on the guitar, and I would like chord along with him, so I learned chording at a pretty early age as well, right? So
your dad had an 808 before Kanye West had an 808.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Honestly, you hear that, like, come
your
on,
dad's the man. Yeah.
Oh man, yeah.
That's awesome. Was there anything that you wanted to be as a kid when you grew up before you figured out you wanted to be a musician?
Yeah, no, I don't really remember if there was really anything else. Like I don't ever, I was never really good at anything else. I'm not the most athletic person in the world. Like I was terrible at t-ball. I don't think I ever even played like baseball. I think I like went from like, I played t-ball for like maybe 5 years, and then I was like, yo, this sucks. Like I hate this, and like not really the most, like I said, like athletic, so I was never really good in that world. When it came to like academics, like I think I just didn't care, and I was kind of like, why do I have to do this stuff, and so it just kind of always, I got pigeonholed, in a good way, because I didn't really like, I don't have anything to fall back on except this. So whether it's a band, or whether it's like doing something else, like maybe it's teaching, or maybe it's like recording or whatever, like there's not really like, I'm not like, oh, the music's not going to work out, I'll become like a math teacher or something like that. Like I'm fucking terrible at math, like, so it's like it just worked out, and it was just, there was not really ever any other kind of thought in my head, maybe not necessarily like playing live. I mean, I definitely, as I got older, I was like, like I got into punk, and I was like, I want to play fucking punk at a show at Masonic Lodge, and that was a goal, So maybe not necessarily up like, like playing in front of, fans or at a show or whatever, but definitely like, oh, like music is kind of a thing that I'm interested in, and I like to play it, so yeah.
And how early on did you realize that you had talent, that you had something musical to offer, that maybe you could actually have a career as a full-time musician?
I still don't know. You know what I mean? Like there's not ever like a moment, you know what I mean? Like I'm always second guessing, right? And maybe that's what kind of maybe that's what propels it, I don't know, but definitely I don't think there was ever a moment where I thought I was good, and I still do. I'm being honest, like I still don't. Like this isn't just some humble, garbage that I'm trying to throw out there. It's like there are musicians that can run circles around me, and I'm very aware of that. And I was well aware of that from a young age, right? Like I always got really uncomfortable, like in high school when like teachers would give me compliments. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I can play, and even now I'm still like, yeah, I can play, but I don't by any means, like, when you think about like real virtuoso, instrumentalists, it's like, no, I'm nowhere near it, and I don't practice enough to even get to that point, so yeah, it's always, I'm very, I think, even tempered with how good I think I might be, if that makes sense.
I put out a bat signal to Arkells fans for questions to send in for this episode. And I had more questions sent in for this episode from fans than any other band I've had on here. So the Arkells army is well and alive and strong. And the questions come in from Ontario, from Manitoba, from the US, so California, Washington. And the first fan question here, well, I guess we had one from Neil already, but yeah. The fan question you might have answered already, but this is Sapphire Schofield, Ontario, Canada. She wants to know, if you weren't a musician, what would you be doing? So is the answer nothing? You can answer that.
I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Like it's funny, over the pandemic, well, like for a lot of people over the pandemic, things have changed and they've needed to pivot and, and figure things out. I was very fortunate that I don't have to really, or at least, yet. I think if maybe we went on for another 5 years, I'd have to start thinking about like, what am I going to have to do now? But, like very fortunate that I was able to kind of still focus on music, and the band had like a ton of stuff that we were still doing, but I had to fill the time. So I started like renovating my basement. Like my dad and I, we just basically took hammers to the walls, and like it was this old, like it hadn't been renovated since like the 1970s. So we just like pulled it apart and put it back together, and it looks great. And he did, a lot of the heavy lifting, but I was kind of like, this is cool. Like when you like tear everything down and you're looking at the bones of your house, you're like, this is crazy. Like how all the piping works and all the electrical, where everything's going and how the framing is built. So I found that to be like very interesting. So I'm like, you start to think, you're like, oh, like maybe that's something that I would get into. I think like my wife would probably say that I'm a little bit too much of a delicate flower, like, and I definitely like injured myself a bunch of times. Like I was pulling out this like wall of tile, and it was like a big chunk, and I pulled so hard that like, and it was stuck on something. So it wasn't, I was pulling so hard, and then my shoulder like popped out like of its socket. Like, and so like my body went back, but my arm stayed forward.
You're not aware of your own strength.
I guess not, but yeah. So, like maybe might not be the best industry for me to get into, and then another thing that I've been doing just because I've been home and is like I've just been cooking a lot. So now I'm kind of like, oh, like I really like, I want to take some cooking classes, and, so fine, like just, what it is, it's just having the time. I get so consumed and obsessed with all this sort of stuff that I kind of just forget about other things, and so having the time to kind of be home, kind of propped up some other, interests, where I was like, oh, this is actually kind of cool. And, and I spent a lot of time with my son. So it's like doing the dad thing. And, so yeah, I mean, sorry, that's a long answer to a question that, yeah, no, I don't really know what else I would be doing. I'm not very good at a lot of other things, but slowly finding other interests. Yeah, at 37, finding other.
It sounds like your wife and your son most benefited from you being home, between you
Yeah,
cooking and being able to spend time with your son. Your new hobbies sound like you could start a reality TV show where it's a rock star that's cooking and doing home renovations,
why am
combining
I
them.
doing
It's popular just home renovations and just cooking, but has anyone put them together with a
Well, there you
rock
go,
star
right?
background? I mean, come on.
Yeah,
All
and
right, we
probably
just
not
pitched
doing
that.
either of them well either.
Yeah, we'll pitch it as like mediocre at, what is it, jack of all trades, master of none, something like that. Um,
Yeah.
I had a question for you. So, did you play in a lot of bands before joining the bigger, more well-known bands? And if so, what's the
Hmm.
most ridiculous band name that you've had? There's
Oh
been
yeah,
some
I
pretty
thought.
humorous ones that we've had.
Oh my goodness, yeah, for sure. Oh, dude, the first band that I ever played in, we started it. I was in grade 8, grade 7 or 8, and it lasted maybe 5 years or something like that. Our band name was Not My Spoon. I don't know why. I think at the time I had this like, you know those like, those like those online like name generator things, or song title generators or meme generators, whatever the hell they are. There was one I remember at the time, like grade 8, I'm like searching online with like my dial-up internet. I'm like, band name generator, and Not My Spoon came out. It was like the first one. I was like, cool, that's our band name. And we didn't do much. We played a couple of Supernova shows, and the likes of that. And but that was probably the most ridiculous one. I was in another band called the Knockouts, and we kind of changed our name a bunch of times, but I think the worst name that we had in that formation was Ruby Sneakers. We were trying to go like really like, what's like the most ska name that we could find, and
That's
you know
it.
two-tone speakers was probably taken, and so we were like Ruby Sneakers. But yeah, some pretty terrible names, man. Yeah.
When we're young, we're often told to get that education, get a good, safe job, play things safe. Did you ever have a fear of not being able to make a living as a musician?
um the best advice that I ever got was I used to do like these like jazz gigs. Like I went to school for jazz piano, right? So there was a period there where I was like kind of in that circuit. I was playing with this artist in Oakville. Her name was Mary Ev. And we did like the Oakville Jazz Fest, and I used to hang out with her and a couple other musicians in the band. We'd go down to this place called the Arbor Cafe on Lakeshore in Oakville, and they had jazz like Friday, Saturday nights, and we would just go in there and just hang out, and like I don't even think I was old enough to drink at the time. Like I think I might have been 16 or 17, and so we were just in there. I had a Coke, and there was this artist that used to play every weekend. His name was Matt Dusk. I don't know if you've ever heard
Yeah,
of him.
he's a big artist.
Yeah, but the dude was playing like quiet time jazz gigs at this place in Oakville, and it was cool. It was really cool, and he was the nicest dude. Like he, like we're like young kids, and well, we want to play shows and we want to play jazz, and I remember the best advice that I ever got was actually, and it stuck with me, was was the keyboardist actually of that band, and he said, because I was like, I asked him the same question, can you make a living doing this? Like what, what does the living look like? And he was just like, don't get into it for the money. He goes, just do it because you want to do it. And I literally, like, I was 16 and I just lived by that, so, as you get older, you start to think about, I have a family now, and so I always do think about that, like, oh, fuck, like, am I going to be able to make a living out of this next year or the year after? And honestly, when COVID hit, I was like, I lost my mind. I was like, holy shit, like we have, like, we live in Toronto, which is not cheap. Like, we have a child, and, like we have a nanny who comes in, and, are we going to be able to afford any of this? And now there's like inflation, and you're like, what's happening?
So sorry for our listeners that aren't musicians and aren't aware.
Yeah.
Most musicians, they make the bulk of their money with live shows, the touring, the ticket sales, the merchandise. So when COVID hits and essentially the live entertainment industry shut down for 2 years, man, all musicians were in a rough spot. So
That's
just
crazy.
giving that disclaimer to people that
No,
don't.
absolutely. No, yeah, no, dude, no one's making money off of record sales anymore. You know what I mean? Like, you know, we get unlimited music for $9.99 a month, you know? So like, yeah, you know, the bulk of you know, the bread and butter comes from live shows, you know, so that was stopped. And again, like we're in a very, I realized shortly after that we are in a very fortunate situation because we were able to pick up on things like Zoom gigs and the, you know, stuff like that, you know, like we ended up releasing like an acoustic record through it, you know, and then did not some you know, we didn't do any like live performances because that wasn't happening, but we did some tape performances which then got sponsored, you know, so it was like, it was great, you know, like we were working, which was really helpful. But yeah, I don't know, you know, is it a stable gig? No, you know, but I don't know, like I like to play, you know, and I don't know I don't know if I would do it uh as maybe consistently. If I wasn't making money, I'd have to find ways to make money, you know. But I'd still play, you know, and I still do things like that don't maybe bring in. And again, I'm lucky because I don't like, you know, I make enough that I'm able to kind of go, hey, do you want to like playing last night, for example, like that, you know, is like, you know, they're my friends, you know, and I really like the music. So I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go and play with you. I don't care, you know, you don't have to pay me anything, you know, like buy me a beer, you know, and so because it's such a great time and you're so connected on stage that it's like it's not worth, you know, or it's I don't want to say it's not worth money. It's you know what I'm trying to say. It's like
Yeah.
there's not a dollar amount that you can put on that, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah, do I fear it? Yeah, I don't know. We'll see what happens. You know?
Yeah.